If you think you already know how the story of ice and fire ends, guess again, because the winds of winter are blowing.
Sir Malagorn offered his arm, and Queen Celise took it stiffly. Her other hand settled on her daughter's shoulder. The royal ducklings fell in behind them as they made their way across the yard, marching to the music of the bells on the fool's hat.
Under the sea, the mermen feast on starfish soup, and all the serving men are crabs,
Patchface proclaimed as they went.
I know, oh.
Melisandre's face darkened. That creature is dangerous. Many a time I have glimpsed him in my flames. Sometimes there are skulls about him, and his lips are red with blood. I wonder you haven't had the poor man burned. All it would take was a word in the queen's ear, and Patchface would feed her fires. You see fools in your fire, but no hint of Stannis? When I search for him, all I see is snow.
Lips red with blood, surrounded by skulls, repeated appearances in Melisandre's night fires. What does it all mean?
Something bad is what it means.
Yeah. I'm Quinn, and I'm here with LML.
And of course, we do need to do a little bit of setup because this is one of those situations where there are some clear differences between the books and the show. On the show, everybody is with Stannis.
Yeah.
Celise, Shireen, and Mel, they're on the march to Winterfell when all this stuff goes down. In the books, Stannis is on the march to Winterfell. Everyone else is at the wall. And that would be, most importantly, Shireen and Melisandre.
And also
Celise.
Patchface.
And Patchface, that's the most important difference between the show and the books.
Not even in the show.
Not even in the show. But in the books, we go into the sea, we get the Patchface rhymes. Yeah, so we're going to talk a lot about Patchface's role because he is kind of the wild card in all of this. And again, I say this is the worst change from book to show is no Patchface. But moving along.
So the HBO showrunners did confirm that something similar happens in the books. Shireen being burned or sacrificed to the Red God. But the difference is that Stannis may or may not be around. Well, Stannis is definitely not around at this point.
Yeah, and probably doesn't have a way to get back to the wall. So emotionally, there's going to be some different beats here, and we'll break down all of that step by step. So first question we've got is, what will the circumstances be surrounding Shireen's potential sacrifice? Or said shorter, why will she be sacrificed?
First up, Celise is a fanatic and could potentially willingly give up Shireen if it was at Mel's command, or even do it herself if she felt like the need to.
Yeah, I think there's a quote about Celise being willing to walk into the fires herself, so that's no question about that. Melisandre, although George has said she's one of the most misunderstood characters, and we saw in her POV character that she is more sympathetic and empathetic than we imagined, she too is willing to make sacrifices. She herself has made great sacrifices. So
service of the Red God, because it's of the most vital importance.
Right, and we saw that with Edric Storm. She was willing to sacrifice one child to save, the many. Davos says, that's not the way to go. But that's a separate question. These people, the R'hllor, are willing to go there. That is the point. So bringing in Patchface, he's going to complicate things because of his connection with Shireen. He's probably going to go ballistic. If anything goes down, he smells the fact they're going to sacrifice her.
Yeah, I can imagine Patchface totally snapping, attacking someone if they try to hurt Shireen. And we can talk about the foreshadowing of Patchface's potential death.
Right, and it was actually in that quote that we started with. So we'll just go back to some of the specific language. She says, of course, many a time I have glimpsed him in my flames, which could be read either way. Jon Snow, in fact, reacts that way when Melisandre is like, many times I've seen you in my fires. And he's like, what, do you mean to burn me? And she's like, no, metaphorically. But it's one of those double entendres. Skulls all about him. His lips are red with blood. Melisandre interprets that as him being bloodthirsty. But what if that's him dying or choking on blood or a symbol of his own death?
And I think him being amongst skulls, maybe it's like a pyre where more people have been also sacrificed.
Right, it's all these
other skulls.
Exactly. Melisandre looks at these symbols and interprets them one way, but they can all be read so many ways. It could be that Patchface's death is being foreshadowed.
And we've seen multiple times that Melisandre inputs her own interpretation over these visions, and she doesn't necessarily interpret them correctly always.
Yeah, and one thing that jumps out is she says, many a time I have glimpsed him. So he's important, clearly. He's going to play some very important role.
Yeah, and Jon Snow made that point. You're not seeing Stannis, but you're seeing Patchface. So it kind of implies that maybe Patchface's role in this is maybe more significant than Stannis's in some way.
Yeah, and of course, time out for symbolism. Patchface is a stagman. There's a lot of important symbolism about burning stagman and burning trees. The stagman being parallel to the tree, the antlers and the branches being similar. And think about the Stannis' sigil. It's the stag of Baratheon, but surrounded by the burning heart. So it's a burning stagman.
Yeah.
And Asha Greyjoy, when she goes down in the woods against Stannis' foes, the last line of the chapter has her seeing, a black stag in a burning wood, which is essentially the sigil melding with the burning trees.
Yeah.
So Patchface, if he climbs onto the pyre, will have yet another burning stag image. And I suspect any sort of pyre that we get, just like Mance Rayder's cage where he was burned, will have weirwood in it. And so we'll have burning weirwood and burning stagman. It's a symbolism bonfire, happy good times for me.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, how will it happen if Shireen is to be healed?
Right. It's obviously to work magic, but what kind of magic? There's a couple of possibilities. In the show, it's basically to stop the snowstorm, which is a little bit
it doesn't fit because they're not with them also here.
Yeah, right. That doesn't work, and it's just motivationally wise, it's not a desperate enough reason.
Yeah,
for even Selyse, a total fanatic, to sacrifice her child.
Let alone Stannis being like, "Oh, it's a little snow. I got to burn my daughter."
Yeah, that didn't really work for me. Stannis, again, like Melisandre, has made his own sacrifices, but it's going to take something monumental, I think, for either one of them to be involved. And we have some monumental kind of motivations around. So there's the others might attack, for example. They're massing and getting ready. We don't know what they're waiting for as a trigger mechanism. We'll talk about that more in the others episode. But it could be Jon Snow's death.
Yeah.
It could be we see the snowstorm amassing in Winterfell. There isn't a Stark in Winterfell. They could be on the move. And if they show up at the wall, Melisandre and Selyse, they could get very desperate.
Yeah, she'll see it as the most paramount, and we got to stop the White Walkers. Child sacrifice is what we need. And then there's also the small possibility that because Shireen has grayscale, that the wildlings would also be in favor of burning her. Because in their whole belief system, they don't think that grayscale actually goes away. It always goes dormant. It'll always come back. So she's a potential threat.
Val's remarks were almost frightening. I mean, the vehemence with which she talked about the child being unclean and basically dead already.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think even the ones that don't believe in Relorism, and remember, there are Relorist converts amongst the wildlings and the Watch at the Wall, it's possible the wildlings won't stop a Shireen burning there. So, and then, of course, the major motivation, the most obvious guess for a Shireen sacrifice would be to raise Jon Snow, because Melisandre probably will be involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, she is the sorceress there, so very obviously she's there to have something to do with Jon Snow's resurrection. And, like they say, blood sacrifice is powerful, and if she needs, a significant amount of power, King's daughter is a pretty, decent source, I would say.
That's true. They're sort of sniffing around that idea of King's blood to wake the dragon. We hear some of the Night's Watchmen at the Wall sort of whispering about what Mel might be doing, and Jon talks about that, 2 kings to wake the dragon, King's blood this, so it's definitely a thing. You can see it all coming together. And more specifically, there is some very interesting foreshadowing for something along the lines, obviously having to do with Shireen's death, that comes in the first time that in the passage where we first see her. It's in A Clash of Kings, so let's go ahead and give you this scene here.
An ugly little girl, a sad fool, and a maester makes 3. Now there is a tale to make men weep. Sit with me, child. Cresson beckoned her closer. This is early to come calling, scarce past dawn. You should be snug in your bed. I had bad dreams, Shireen told him, about the dragons. They were coming to eat me. The child had been plagued by nightmares as far back as Cresson could recall. We have talked about this before, he said gently. The dragons cannot come to life. They are carved of stone, child. Shireen was unconvinced. What about the thing in the sky? Dalla and Matrice were talking about the well, and Dalla said she heard the Red Woman tell Mother that it was dragon's breath. If the dragons are breathing, doesn't that mean they are coming to life? The Red Woman, Maester Cresson thought sourly. Ill enough that she's filled the head of the mother with her madness. Must she poison the daughter's dreams as well?
So we've got some sort of foreshadowing here of Shireen dying to feed a dragon, getting eaten or burned by a dragon. So is Jon that dragon? His resurrection fire could be perceived as a dragon fire in that sense.
The dragon being woken, exactly.
Yeah, and it also it works for the waking dragons from stone as well. So that would be a nice tie-up of several ideas there. We know that it's going to be some sort of R'hllorist incident. We said we know Mel is... Well, not we know, but we suspect strongly Mel will be involved in Jon's resurrection.
Almost certainly.
And then there's even a mention of the comet in that passage. They talked about the dragons, and then they mentioned the comet. So more Azor Ahai reborn clues. A clue that the dragon that's going to eat Shireen has something to do with Azor Ahai. Now, it could be a more metaphorical take about Stannis's mission to be Azor Ahai and the sacrifices that entails consuming Shireen. So we've got the comet in the mix. We've got the idea of waking the dragon, Shireen dying. And Melisandre is the one making her afraid of the comet and the dragons, which Crescent is kind of, upset about. So all the ingredients for this potential event are right there.
Everything is pointing at Melisandre being involved.
Okay, and then as far as the idea of the dragon that consumes Shireen being more of a thematic message, like we said, representing Stannis's and Selyse's fealty to R'hllor and their quest for Stannis to be Azor Ahai reborn. There's a pretty good quote about this, which we'll go ahead and read right now.
Your Grace, said Davos, the cost. I know the cost. Last night, gazing into the hearth, I saw things in the flames as well. I saw a king, a crown of fire on his brows, burning, burning, Davos. His crown consumed his flesh and turned him into ash. Do you think I need Melisandre to tell me what that means? Or you? The king moved so his shadow fell upon King's Landing. If Joffrey should die, what is the life of one bastard boy against a kingdom? Everything, said Davos softly.
Burning, burning Davos. So Stannis sees the crown consume himself as well. So when we're talking about Shireen's dream and the fire consuming her, maybe Stannis' desire for all of this will end up not only consuming him, but his entire bloodline.
It does have that Azor Ahai feel to it, where everything is sacrificed, and the sacrifices are very dire. It's blood magic.
But Stannis is willing to make that sacrifice, clearly.
Yeah, so I like how the dragon works there on a lot of levels. Could represent Jon, could represent R'hllorism, could represent the whole Azor Ahai mission, or basically kind of all of them together,
So finally, we can talk about some of the potential reactions that various people could have to the burning of Shireen. The wildlings, the other men of the Night's Watch, Stannis, Davos.
Right, okay, so we're going to get into this in our video about the general chaos at the Wall. But it's very likely that the wildling faction will hold control over Castle Black after things shake out. They just have the numbers on their side.
They do.
And they have Wound Moon. And they have Borok and the Boar and all that stuff. So they will probably control Castle Black. Their opinion is going to matter the most. Like we said, the wildlings have very strong beliefs about grayscale. It may change their opinion of Stannis and the R'hllor, not Stannis, but just the R'hllorists and Shireen and Selyse and all those people, because even if they agree that grayscale, people should be euthanized essentially, they still might be like, whoa, these people are really hardcore.
Burning a child is pretty gruesome. I mean, taking her out would be one thing, but burning her alive? I mean, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, and we saw on the show, one thing that they did do on the show kind of right is Selyse and Stannis felt horrible afterwards. Selyse hung herself from a tree afterwards. So at least they did something to show the cost, the emotional turmoil of fanaticism,
Yeah.
But it's going to be awful. No matter what happens,
Yeah.
It's going to be really sad.
So we pretty much know how Davos's reaction will be. He'll obviously be heartbroken. He'll hate Melisandre, assuming that she has any kind of involvement with it. He'll be crushed.
He will. It could lead him to even leave Stannis altogether.
That could be the straw that breaks the camel's back if Stannis is okay with it or kind of indifferent.
Yeah. And the most important reaction is that of Stannis himself. This is going to be the major mechanism here. Okay, so Stannis is very likely not to be there. This is one of the ways that we actually know that Stannis didn't die at the Battle of Ice, because if his daughter is sacrificed because of this Relorism that he's brought into his house, because of this mission to be Azor Ahai that he's taken on, narratively speaking, he has to see that and appreciate the consequences of his choices. So there's no way George will kill him off.
It would
Hey,
be
George.
regretting.
Hey, look, he's in the Weirwood tree.
Oh, he's been hiding this entire
The whole
time. God.
And George, being a good writer, he knows that Stannis is going to have to come to grips with the cost of his fanaticism. And so I think we will see Stannis come back to the Wall. He's gonna feel awful. I mean,
He'll feel awful. Shireen is his heir at the very least, right? And he's not going to be happy with his heir being killed. Now, he's never really had a father-daughter bond relationship with her. But I don't think Stannis is just going to be like, oh, it's fine that you burned my daughter alive.
yeah, no. In fact, it's well known, actually, that Stannis loves his daughter. I mean, even Peter Baelish knows it, as he says. Littlefinger gestured languidly. A trade envoy from Lys once observed that Lord Stannis must love his daughter very well, since he'd erected hundreds of statues of her all along the walls of Dragonstone. My lord, I had to tell him, those are gargoyles. It's that Peter Baelish humor. Shireen's the gargoyle. Okay, anyway.
Poor Shireen.
There is now, as you said, Stannis does value Shireen as his heir, and in fact, in the Winds of Winter sample chapter, I believe it's a Theon chapter, but we're getting the view of Stannis' camp. He tells Justin Massey, actually, I think I screwed that up. I think it is A Dance with Dragons, but whatever. Don't edit it out. Just leave that in. We're going live. Mm-hmm. We'll do it live.
We'll do it live.
He basically, the point is, Stannis says, if I die, you will avenge my death and seat my daughter on the Iron Throne or die in the attempt. So he does believe in the idea of making her queen of Westeros.
Yes.
Which is cool. Stannis, women's rights. He's
House
a feminist. Who
Baratheon,
knew?
yeah.
He gelds the rapist, and he's going to make his daughter the first queen. So
Absolutely.
well, first queen since first solo queen, I guess.
First solo queen.
Yeah, there's Alysanne and Visenya and Rhaenys got to give the respect, but
Heck
in
yeah.
any case, I guess that about does it for today. We tried to make this as least depressing as possible.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's I guess not really an anticipated plotline, or at least anticipated with dread, but it is going to be important. So.
Yeah, it's a little sad. We are talking about child sacrifice and all that, so it's a little heavy.
We did our best, but we'll be back next time with something a little bit more lighthearted.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to both of our channels. Links in the description.